All right, a few months ago, Alicia Garza was on our show talking about the Black to the Future Action Fund and their survey of African Americans. So if y'all sitting here saying, I see some of y'all in our YouTube chat, I didn't get the survey because your ass wasn't paying attention. We told you. All right, now they're releasing their findings from a year-long temperature check on Black Americans. Joining us right now is Alicia Garza, the principal of the Black Futures Lab and the Black to the Future Action Fund. Also joining us is Mondale Robinson, the principal of the Black Male Voters Project, also the mayor of Enfield, North Carolina, recently elected to that particular position. Glad to have both of you here. All right, Alicia, what is the top concern of Black people?
Well, Roland, it's great to be with you here today, as always. Thank you for having us on the show today. You know, we conducted the largest recurring poll of Black people in America. And the number one and number two priority for Black folks consistently was relief and recovery from COVID-19, especially $2,000 a month stimulus checks to help relieve the pressure from the economic fallouts of the global pandemic. The second one, of course, was increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And then, of course, this was followed by needing to have more accountability and bold action around white nationalist violence and racial terror. And when you bring all these things together, Roland, what you see is that Black folks in this country want to see bold, progressive policies that are dealing with the economy and our day-to-day. We want to make sure that we can keep a roof over our head. We want to make sure that we can send our kids to college. But more than that, we want to make sure we can keep food in our refrigerators. And what we're seeing in terms of satisfaction amongst Black folks with how the Biden administration is doing around improving our economic conditions and protecting us from racial terror and racial violence is that Black folks are deeply dissatisfied. Why did we do this poll? Well, because in just about 100 days, the midterm elections are coming. And we know that Democrats need to hold on to seats in the House and increase seats in the Senate in order for us to keep passing the types of policies that will address the challenges in Black communities. And yet what we're seeing is that with this deep level of dissatisfaction, that it's quite possible that Black voters, who are the core of the Democratic Party, will not show up to participate because people don't feel like their issues are being addressed. It's important for people to understand this is not a done deal and it doesn't have to be this way, but we do need to course correct immediately if we are to reach the goal of expanding Democratic majorities in Congress so that we can get things done for Black families, which ultimately means that we're getting things done for America.
I want to go back to the first two. Folks, pull it up, please. The first two, folks. Come on. The first two. Today, thank you. 56% are dissatisfied with the state of the economy. 46% report their personal financial situation as bad or very bad. When you look at the issues out there, you have obviously Democratic candidates talking about the issue of abortion. You have January 6th. You have Republicans who are trying to save the economy. We've had now 2 consecutive quarters of GDP going down. Folks say, oh, that means now recession. You've got companies talking about potentially laying off people because there's a fear of the recession. Mondale, you just got elected. So the question is, with all of that, with that being the feeling, well, what does that then say? How people are going to turn out? We already know on Republicans, there's huge enthusiasm. They want to see these MAGA people in office. You've got folks who are Black, who are progressives, who don't feel the same way. They're not as excited about President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris. Pull the numbers up. This is what the survey shows in terms of the approval ratings. In terms of President Biden's approval rating, 65%. Vice President Harris's approval rating, 66%. If you are a Democrat and those are your numbers, you are DOA. So, Mondale, what should these politicians be saying to Black people between now and November?
Well, I think, first of all, I think polling whether Black people specifically are excited or motivated about candidates or a particular party is probably not a good way to measure, Roland, what's going to happen. I think what Alicia just laid out was Black people are more concerned with the issues that's plaguing them, things that are keeping them from being able to pay their usual bills like utilities and also provide groceries to their families. I think these issues, and until Democrats get out a plan to address these issues, they're always going to be DOA, not just because Biden and the other Democrats have low approval ratings. It's about the fact that they told us, they swear on their name that they were going to make Black people and our issues important and a priority in this administration. And Black people don't feel protected, as shown in this poll, nor do we feel like people are out here fighting for our issues or prioritizing them. So I think we could keep capping all we want to about people being motivated about a certain candidate, whoever they are, until you are laying out a platform and also showing people that you're not showing up transactional. Black people are not going to be excited about any damn thing related to elections.
When we look at these issues here, first of all, Alicia, again, how many people participated in this survey?
Over 6,000 people participated in this survey over the course of a year. And Mondale is right. It's really important for us to understand that when it comes to candidates, right, what people are looking for is how you've performed on the issues that we care about. And right now, amongst Black communities, folks are not feeling like our priorities are the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration. That's not to knock them. It's to say that if you need to keep your numbers in the House and you need to expand your numbers in the Senate, and people are looking at you saying, you don't have my priorities in mind and you haven't done the things that I voted for you to do, then there's less of a likelihood that people are going to show up. As I said before, this isn't a done deal. They can actually shift and change this. We talk every election cycle, Roland, about the need for year-round investment and engagement by Democrats of Black people and Black communities around the issues we care about. Not symbolic engagement, but substantive engagement. We talk a lot, Roland, each time I'm on, about the ways in which the primary strategy of the party has been to chase white suburban voters and actually move towards the issues that they care about. Of course, there was a big frenzy this week about President Biden's budget proposal, which was released, of course, earlier this year, but he just actually started to shop it around the country, the Safer Communities Act, which is essentially quite reflective of what we saw in 1994 with the crime bill. These are the types of things that make Black voters feel, right, as if we're not being protected, as if our concerns are not being prioritized. And when we start to chase the issues of communities who are, quite frankly, fickle friends to Democrats, as opposed to putting at the center the needs and the priorities of the strongest base of the party, you can understand why there would be a concern about whether or not your strongest base is actually going to turn out for you. So if that's your goal, you need to shift strategy. And that is why we did this poll.
So today, the House passed a CHIPS bill that deals with manufacturing semiconductors, a $280 billion bill. The thing that immediately jumps out to me, Mondale, is like, okay, those are, quote, subsidies. If this was another conversation, we'd be calling that welfare.
Welfare.
So the first thing that jumps out at me is, okay, who benefits from this? Who's the money going to? What major companies? Do those companies have HBCU initiatives? How is that money getting to Black folks as well? $280 billion. Again, to me, if you're the White House, you might want to be explaining that. How's it going to impact communities or small towns like yours in North Carolina? How's it going to impact African Americans? How's it going to impact inner cities? How will it impact HBCUs? Because you don't want it to simply, it seems as if, oh, it's going to benefit these major Silicon Valley companies and it's going to benefit the oracles of the world when you have Larry Ellison who believes in the big lie and is backing Donald Trump.
Yeah, listen, I think Alicia was playing nice on your show with your listeners when she called them fickle friends. White suburbans are not Democrats' fickle friends. They are Republicans. it. We just got to say that. It's not just rural people that are southern rural people that are conservative voters. The Democrats have not won the majority of white voters in this country since the 60s, and they're never gonna they're never gonna do it again as long as they're playing politics about progressive issues, even if they're doing it in a light manner. What I will say though is just like this chip bill, there's no checks on where that money is going to go and who's going to get it. Most likely, none of it or very little of it will end up in black communities or benefiting black people. And the reason the Biden administration isn't or can't talk about it is because they didn't think about it when they was writing that bill. Like you said, they weren't intentional about ensuring that black people benefit from this $280 billion they're about to spend with some of the richest people in this country. Furthermore, we still got some checking to do and finding out where funds are spent from COVID relief. We know that a lot of these resources already went to police departments around this country. Some of it was supposed to be to benefit rural communities. We got to address where that money is. Who's checking on that? You were talking in your last segment about having the resources to go back and check on that. I think Alicia Garza and the team over at Black to the Future Action Fund have started that conversation. But we need to get real serious about figuring out who is receiving all these funds that supposedly are to benefit black people. And the reason I'm talking about rural black people so often is because in black spaces in the South, we are overpopulated in rural spaces. We are 33% of that population. So that's more than our national average. So people need to really think about what's happening to rural people and how we're being ostracized, especially from resources, especially when you're a black person.
The survey also shows 73% support progressive measures on abortion rights, 85% favor Congress authorizing $2,000 monthly COVID-19 relief checks for every American until the economy recovers. And so that's also what it says there. I got questions for my panel. First off, Eric, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so thank you, Alicia, and congratulations to you, Mayor Robinson. And I was kind of interested in a bit of both of what you said with relationship to the SAFE Act, that there has been some disinformation around what that bill actually contains. And my good sis Reese, who's on the panel as well, does a lot of work around disrupting disinformation. Both of you all seen in your respective places where disinformation, even withholding those that represent the Democratic Party to court for what they have said that they're going to do for folks who have voted for them? Have you all seen an infiltration of disinformation, even with information that you all have been putting out? And what are some measures that you are both taking in your respective places to help combat them, especially with the Safer Communities Act, where there's some disinformation about that being parallel to the 1994 crime bill?
Well, I'll start off and just say that there are some deep concerns, and those concerns are valid. And part of the way in which disinformation is able to spread and proliferate as it is and as it does is because there is such a gap between engagement and investment in our communities, that in that gap, what gets inside, right, are operatives and people who don't have our best interests at heart or in mind. And they're able to take a grain of truth, right, and turn it into something that it is not. And so if we want to, and the best way for us to counter misinformation and disinformation, especially as it's targeting Black communities, is to increase our investment in making sure that Black communities are being engaged, not just when we need something from us, but year-round and ongoing, even when we have disagreement about what the outcome is. Certainly in the Safer Communities Act, for example, there are some things that are very interesting. I would call it, both a carrot and a stick kind of a bill. And yet there are some real deep concerns that Black communities do and should have about some of the punitive measures in this bill. Now, again, if Black communities are deeply engaged in the process of both crafting and putting forward their solutions around what it is that they want to see happen as it relates to addressing crime and violence in our communities, what it looks like to do violence prevention work in our communities, then we wouldn't have to do the work around disinformation and misinformation that we're doing now. With that being said, the Safer Communities Act is not the only place where we see misinformation and disinformation proliferate. We see it in governor's races here in my state in Georgia. We see it in every place where, in particular, it's possible to wield and expand Black political power. That is the point and the goal of misinformation and disinformation. We spent all of 2020 really trying to break down myths around voting, around access to voting, around whether or not people could vote. And we also spent the entire year breaking down myths and facts about people's records and what they're proposing. I think we've got to find a healthy tension, right, between what we think the appropriate measures are and can and should be around addressing some of the most prolific and ongoing challenges in our communities. And we have to make sure that we're closing the gap with engagement if we're really trying to take on this question of disinformation and misinformation.
Reese.
Thank you. Erica covered the disinformation part. I actually am very familiar and I deeply respect the work of the Black Futures Lab and the Black Voter Project. In 2019, when it was released, I did a deep dive on it because I was a supporter of Senator Kamala Harris at the time. And her policies all hit all the marks. The $2,000 relief checks is actually a proposal from Senator Kamala Harris that she introduced in Congress. So, I think my concern is I think that the results are very illuminating, and I think that it's a great basis for formulating conversations as opposed to making assumptions about what Black voters want. But then it seems to me like it still goes back to kind of the regular broader talking points about what, is not being done in terms of messaging or what is not being done in terms of outreach. What's the next step in terms of actually marrying what Black voters want to what's actually being proposed? Because I do see a disconnect in the way that it's being talked about in terms of what is being done legislatively with the executive branch in comparison to what Black voters want. And I think it also only talks about Democrats as opposed to Republicans, who are completely on the opposite side of everything, lowering insulin, lowering the cost of insulin, expanding Medicare, a number of things. So is there any kind of plan to do like a congressional scorecard or a gubernatorial scorecard or anything like that? Because I feel like we keep having these conversations about perceptions as opposed to having real, I don't want to say we're not having fact-based conversations, but having something tangible that we could say, yes, this person is hitting the mark. No, that person is not hitting the mark.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to kick it to the mayor because I know the mayor's been doing work in 17 states across the country for years now, engaging Black male voters to try to close the gap, right, between the party engagement and what communities actually need. We are doing the same thing, both in partnership with the Black Male Voter Project, but also in partnership with Black organizations in more than 5 states across the country. We know that organizations like Black Voters Matter are giving the tools to Black communities that we need in order to make sure that we're not just paying attention to the problem, but that we're crafting the solution. I think the challenge here, Reese, and I appreciate your point so much, that we need to figure out how it is that we're moving forward. I mean, one of the things that we say all the time is that what we want the Democratic Party to do is engage our people the way we engage our people, because we know that that works. And what tends to happen in each election cycle is that the burden for doing that work lands on grassroots community-based organizations, and we need to be able to actually share some of this load. Mayor, what would you say in response to this?
I mean, I don't think you're too far off the mark at all. I think the fact of the matter is the bulk of the resources around engaging people or turning people out to the poll goes to the Democratic Party and its auxiliaries. But a majority of that work is done by organizations like ours that work year-round with our community, highlighting and learning what issues are most important to us. And then we are told, supposedly by white consultants, that we just need to message better or react better based on an ad. I think the problem with saying that, the engagement isn't or there's a gap between engagement and then action is that I think that's a chicken or egg situation. Whereas if we are engaging people more, that also means we are educating people more about the issues, and that scorecard goes out the window. We don't need a scorecard when we're always talking to people about what issues are important to them and telling them who's already right on those issues. So through engagement, I think the scorecard is natural. When we engage Black men, the conversations are automatic. These brothers, we shouldn't assume that just because people don't play politics, they don't know what's going on and what's not going on around him. I think the best part about Black people and this disinformation, we can say what we want to about how much money Republicans spent on disinformation. It epically failed in 2020. And we saw that. We saw a record number of people coming out to vote. We saw Black men who were old enough to vote for Barack Obama but didn't come out and vote in primary election seasons and states, even when the Democratic nominee for president had already been named, which means these people were not motivated by statewide or federal candidates. They were motivated by local candidates, nonpartisan races, and also issues that were super important to them. And I think the Democratic Party continues to miss that part. It's not to say that the Republicans aren't your opponent. It is to say that I will stay at home if you continue to ignore me. And we saw that this election cycle in 2022 in Georgia's primary, where we lost 7% of the Black voters.
Greg.
Thank you, Roland. And thank you, Sister Garza. And thank you, Brother Mayor Robinson. I really, listening to Reese and listening to Erica, don't know that I have anything other than to ask what we need, not just what you need at the Futures Lab, the Black Male Voter Project, but, this is a Black-owned network. It's trying to punch through the noise. And, during COVID, everybody was at home who could be at home. Many of our people had to work, obviously, but versus streaming, everybody's locked in. But now, this blitz, I live here in the DC area, and developers carpet bombed voters with all types of ads to try to stop progressives from getting in. How do we, I guess it's kind of a two-sided of the same question. What do you need? What do we need in terms of resources that can help close this gap, this engagement gap you're talking about, Alicia? And how do we really, as they perfect getting ready to steal these elections that they can in 2 and 4, and like you say, you're in Georgia, Lisa, you see it up close with Herschel Walker in particular. How do we answer those of our comrades, our colleagues, our brethren and sistren who are self-declared on the left and say there isn't enough of a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans for us to even get in this conversation? And in some ways, that's being used to kind of stoke Black voter apathy. But what do we need? Is it more resources? Is it more networking? It just seems like we're getting carpet bombed by these billionaires and all this money trying to just create confusion. And some of our people seem to be abetting it, albeit with the best intentions.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad that you asked this question, and I think it is absolutely the $1 million question. There's a few things I would offer here. Number one, those of us who know better need to jump in our cars. We need to get next to an organization that is knocking on doors and trying to reach people that aren't being reached. And why that is important is not just to expand the capacity of these organizations that are taking on Herculean tasks, but it's also to just stay connected to what real people who don't play politics but are political are really talking and thinking about. The fact of the matter is elections do matter. And we talk about this all the time when I come on this show. And this is a place where Uncle Roland and I come together without fail. Elections do matter, and they don't just matter in terms of what's happening in the White House and in Congress, but it matters in terms of what's happening in your neighborhood. Mayor Robinson mentioned earlier that we have been doing a range of FOIA requests to try to understand better where the COVID-19 relief and recovery dollars are going. And what we're finding in the 5 states that we're targeting, California, Louisiana, Wisconsin, Georgia, and North Carolina, is that upwards of 40% of those dollars have gone to law enforcement efforts when they were supposed to go to housing and eviction relief.
Right.
They were supposed to go to education. They were supposed to go to economic relief. And so it's important for us to do more listening than what we're doing. And anytime people say elections don't matter and there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats, I just encourage them to go sit at kitchen tables with people, bounce somebody's grandbaby on your knee, sit on people's porches and really talk to people about what they're experiencing. Second thing I would offer here is that I think what we need to focus more on, the left is going to do what the left is going to do, and I consider myself to be a part of it, and I can tell you this is a place where we diverge. But where I think we really need to be focused on is, people for whom they feel like everybody's left them behind. And that's really the place where we can dig in and make a difference. In our organization, we are doing scorecards. You will be able to go on our website and develop a voter guide based on the issues that you care about. We want to make sure people have the tools they need when they go to the polls, but we also want to make sure that our communities have the tools we need to change the rules and make the rules. We are also doing a Black Census project where we're surveying 200,000 Black people before October 31st about what it is that we deal with every day and what we want to see done about it so that we can have a legislative agenda that we're moving beginning in the next cycle in January of 2023. So I think what we need to continue to do, right, is stay focused on the prize. We are going to continue to push to make sure that there is investment and engagement from the party that Black folks uplift and basically make what it is. But it's also important for us to just stay engaged on the ground. Mayor, what would you say?
I would say everything you said, plus we got to stop referring to the Democratic Party like it's something in the third person. That's our party. We are the power behind the Democratic Party. They don't win elections without the Black vote. So to say the Democrats are messing up, what we need to say is the money behind the Democratic Party need to start demanding more listening from Black people and of Black people, because that's our party. If the Black people sat out that party, it doesn't exist at all. And I think too often we don't recognize the power in owning what's ours. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is usually when people are saying that there's no difference between Democrat and Republican, they're trying to say I don't understand what's going on and not feel like they are ignorant. So it's our job to hear that, like Sister Alicia said, make sure we're listening properly, because that's a red flag to say this person needs more information about what's happening in their community, what's happening at their state level, and also nationally, because you can't see these two parties and say there's not much difference unless you're just looking at Joe Manchin. But what I would say that there's a ton of stuff that we can do on talking about Black people. There's Black resources in our community that's not being spent with Black organizations. We know some Black people have the ability to give, and they rather give to the party than give to our organizations. I think that is a worse of return on investment you can do. Giving your resources to the party is a bad idea. Those resources should be going to organizations that talk to Black people year round, that are trusted messengers, that understand what's important to our community and have already figured out holistically what's necessary to move voters from the sideline to the poll. And I don't call people sporadic voters because it lets the party and all of its auxiliaries off the line, when in actuality, we know when you spend more resources on voters or people, they're more likely to become super voters. So they're less invested in. So we call them low investment voters, not sporadic. And I think Black people make up the bulk of the low investment voters, whereas the white people in the Democratic Party, even those that look like us, sometimes think white when they want to go chase these conservative-leaning Republicans or Republican-like Democrats. And I mean that because if you listen to the talking points about critical race theory all through 2021, it cost us everything in Virginia because we were talking to Republicans and we weren't talking about the issues that were plaguing Black people, i.e. the economy, i.e. the loss of that $2,000 monthly check, i.e. Trying to understand how 1 in 5 of us had contracted COVID and all 40-some% of us knowing people that had died from COVID. That's a massive loss, not just in resources, but in human life that Democrats ain't say nothing about, but they damn well talked an entire election season about critical race theory as if any of them know what it is.
All right, then. First of all, where can people see the full results, Alicia?
You can go to Black, blackthefuture.org. You can also check out the Black Census at blackcensus.org. Make your voice heard before October 31st.
All righty, folks. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much, Alicia, and, well, it's Mondale. Thanks so much. All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?